Hello everyone, this is Remlays from 40k Theories, and welcome to the November 2020 edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Now, let's jump into the questions. Thomas Badkin asks, is there any Space Marine chapter with dog in their name? Not that I recall, but there are a couple with hound in their name if that helps. Like you got the Iron Hounds chapter for example, and you have the Warhounds Legion, which was the World Eaters before they were reunited with Angron, so if that counts I guess? Brent Feast asks, what would your hypothetical ideal 40k video game be? Dynasty Warriors or Warriors Orochi but with the Primarchs, so taking down massive hordes of enemies with ever increasingly elaborate attacks. Chef's kiss, perfect. Mike Murdoch asks, if you could bring back one non-40k tabletop game by Games Workshop, which one would you have them bring back and why? Chainsaw Warrior, because Chainsaw Warrior was awesome. That being said, as a second choice, Dark Future. How are abhumans treated in the Tau Empire? I don't think that's ever been touched up upon, but if I had to guess, I'd say they'd be treated about as well as, well, any other human in the Tau Empire. Kari Wolfong asks, other than cool, will the Adeptus Mechanicus finally get off their collective arse and start making real progress towards innovation and invent something that didn't come from an STC? Given how strictly dogmatic the majority of the Mechanicus is, I sincerely doubt it. I think the closest we're going to get is what you see with the Deathwatch, to be honest, because in the 9th edition Deathwatch Codex they show that, well, the Deathwatch have reverse-engineered Tau pulse rifle technology and even made servo skulls out of Eldari heads. Which is quite funny because in Sons of the Hydra, a mentor got kicked out of his chapter because he was reverse-engineering pulse rifle technology so that he could make plasma guns safer. Which is quite ironic. Why are Imperial ships insanely larger than other ships from other fandoms? Overcompensation? Funny enough, there was a YouTube channel whose name escapes me who did a video like compiling the sizes and scales of all these various ships from different sci-fi franchises, and funnily enough 40k wasn't actually the largest. I think it was only about like halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through. They had like an Emperor class battleship. Oh god, trying to remember the other sci-fi franchises in that, because I think Halo had ships that were larger, and I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy actually had ships that were larger. So, they're larger than some, but by no means all. Griffin of Might asks, oh god, this is a very, very long one. Right, okay, it's 3 parts, okay, that's not. Could Caiaphas Cain actually be protected or guided by the Emperor in some way without knowing? I have no idea, I haven't read enough of the Caiaphas Cain novels to make a judgment on that. Would the rubric or flesh change affect the hypothetical Primaris Marines with Thousand Sons gene seed should Core attempt to create some? Given all the evidence that we have, yes. Because in Fury of Magnus, minor spoiler, you can turn away now, and I say minor spoiler because it's the something I brought up last time. Back during the Great Crusade, neither the Emperor nor the Selenar gene cults could remove the flesh change from the Thousand Sons gene seed. They had to use arcane means to do so with the rubric. And by that I mean the Thousand Sons themselves. So, if the Emperor couldn't do it, and the Selenar gene cults couldn't do it, who, to reiterate, were the greatest geneticists to ever live, which is why the Emperor was so desperate to get them on board during, the Great Crusade, I doubt Cole could. Even with his expertise and the knowledge of the 2 minds living in his head, from what I can recall from the Great Work, I doubt that he could very much so. And bear in mind, back during the Great Crusade, Space Marine gene seed was much purer and much more stable than it is by today's standards. Effectively, Primaris gene seed, their purity is essentially on par with that from the Great Crusade. So, if they couldn't get rid of it then, you ain't gonna be able to get rid of it now, in my opinion. If the Blood Ravens aren't Thousand Sons loyalists, is it possible that they are word bearers? And there is a very, very long paragraph explaining all the evidence behind it, such as the Aurelia subsector, the planet Cyrene, etc., and such. This is something I have seen pop up a few times in the Blood Ravens video, in the comment section, and it's an interesting possibility. I feel that there isn't as much evidence as there is towards the Thousand Sons possibility, even though that one has been effectively debunked. The idea of the subsector Aurelia and the planet Sirian that being linked to the word bearers themselves is an interesting one, but it could also be something as simple as the fact that the word bearers may have simply brought the subsector into compliance during the course of the Great Crusade. I mean, it's not entirely outside the realm of possibility for, the word bearers to have brought that into compliance, only for official records to be doctored to say another legion did it entirely. This was actually shown with, oh god, what was it? It was a short story with the Warbringers chapter that basically showed hey, this world's uncovered a giant bolt pistol, and our world was brought into compliance by the Ultramarines. This must be Rabute Gilliman's bolt pistol. Even though, in actuality, the world was brought into compliance by the Lunar Wolves, and it was actually Horus's bolt pistol, which is why the Inquisition was like, oh, we need to get rid of that because it's tainted, kind of thing. Actually, the Inquisitor wanted to keep it the study, but the Warbringers were like, no, we need to blow this shit up, and the Inquisitors were like, okay, yeah, fine, you're Space Marines, I ain't gonna argue, because I ain't gonna be able to take on an entire squad of you by myself. I'm not that stupid. Austin Horner asks, in the book Manflayer, Fabius Bile, in order to gain the aid of Fulgrim and demonic hordes of Slaanesh in defending his new men, would undergo a ritual where he would lay upon a stone slab and stabbed himself in the chest. As a result of this ritual, does Fulgrim and, by extension, Slaanesh now own Fabius Bile's soul? This is an interesting one. If his soul isn't tied directly to Slaanesh now, then it is potentially, at the very least, partially tethered to it. I would say we might find out in the next book, but we ain't gonna get a next book because Josh Reynolds has left Black Library, so we're just gonna get stuck with the trilogy. I think that he is now intrinsically bound to Chaos now, even though he is, even if he is still, somewhat atheistic or mesotheistic at the very least. Actually, I think that might be the more likely possibility, that his soul is bound to Slaanesh, but he is in fact himself mesotheistic. Which means, he doesn't give a toss either way, because this is Fabius Bile, and when does Fabius Bile give a toss about anything other than his creations? He doesn't. Voice of the Emperor asks, did the Primarchs have sex drives and had children? I don't think it's been explicitly stated per se, but it's possible that the Primarchs did have some sort of sex drive, even if it was very, very low, because in Fulgrim the Palatine Phoenix, Fulgrim himself was married multiple times, and one would think that at some point Fulgrim would have had to have consummated the marriages. So, whether he was fertile or not is a completely different matter, but yeah, it's totally possible that the Primarchs could have a sex drive. It's just that they're so single-minded in their tasks, be it, devotion to the Emperor or bureaucracy or beating the shit out of people, whatever, that they just simply don't have time. And let's be honest, it'd be very difficult for them to find a sexual partner regardless, because a lot of people, while they may show devotion in adoration towards a Primarch, they're not necessarily going to think, ooh, he's a bit sexy, or anything like that. If anything, they're probably going to be very intimidated, because the Primarchs, despite the aura of adulation that they, exude, they're also going to be extremely intimidating beings to, not only, regular people, but to Space Marines as well. So, if a regular person is going to be flat out intimidated by simply being in their presence, I can't imagine it being too easy for them to coax someone to bed. Do Astartes have skeletal reinforcement as part of becoming a Space Marine? Yes, the osmodular organ. The osmodular organ not only stimulates bone growth and increases bone density, but it also reinforces the skeletal structure with ceramic-based compounds. Zero Hits asks, what if the Tau started acquiring their own stocks of gene seed in a plot to create their own army of Space Marines, indoctored into the ways of the greater good and armed with Tau tech? How effective would they be, and how completely furious would the real Space Marines be? I mean, Tau firepower is incredible, let's be honest. It is incredible. You say what you want about Tau being shit in melee, when it comes to sheer firepower, there are a few armies that can match them. Now, when you take that firepower and match it with the size and strength and durability of a Space Marine, what you're going to get is something incredibly dangerous upon the battlefield. I mean, there was that short story about a single Space Marine chapter master that was free from stasis and ran rampant across, a Tau civilian world, and he was basically a one-man wrecking crew to the fact that he was a danger to the entire world. This one Space Marine was so feared by the Tau. So, if the Tau were able to create their own versions, if they just basically replicate the process to create Tau Space Marines, like forcing Tau to undergo genetic augmentation process, they probably wouldn't be as strong as human Space Marines, but they would certainly be strong enough to be, a legitimate threat in close quarters. And as for how furious the real Space Marines would be, the Imperium would be so incredibly furious that they might just launch a full-blown xenocidal campaign against the Tau for corrupting humanity's genetic purity. But we won't know for certain. Chief Surgeon asks, page 25 of the Necron 9th edition Codex, Strange Host, rewords the description of the Haunted Legions of Sarkon, which is the Empire of the Severed. Also, now that we have a new description of the Fallen Lord of Drazak, Valgul, about how he only has one eye. What do you think of these two changes? To be honest, I think anything that expands the lore with additional information is only a good thing, to be honest. And finally, Albrick asks, has there ever been an instance of a Xenos ascending to demonhood? Yes, no named examples, but in the book Freebooters, when detailing Chaos Orc warbands, it does mention how some Chaos Orc warbands will follow an Orc Demon Prince. So the fact that it states that Orc Demon Princes are a thing means that yes, some Orcs have ascended to demonhood. And that concludes this edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Until next time, this has been Remlays from 40k Theories, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.